for that pause. Again, saw a handful more individuals joined, so we'll go ahead and start. Again, good morning. My name is Mark Voloshin. I'm the Deputy Secretary of State for Elections, here working for Secretary of State Francisco Aguilar, who asked us to put on this presentation today specifically to demonstrate and to show you all a little bit about the voter registration and election management solution that state and county and local election officials have been working on for some time now. Today, I will be presenting along with one of my colleagues, Mr. David DeLucia, who will be working the slides for me. So Dave, if you don't mind, slide, please. So here's an overview of what we're going to talk about over roughly the next hour or so. Again, we are going to have this recorded. I do want to stress that again and make it available. But we're going to talk a little bit about the history of this VREMS project. We're doing that in part because when we looked at the RSVP list, there were a number of names that were new, and frankly, that I don't think we're aware of the background or the impetus for why this project came to be in the first place. Then we're going to jump into the demonstration itself. I want to start, though, by talking about what this is going to be and what this is not going to be. This is going to be a demonstration to show you and the people that you work with some slides, some pictures about the system and how the system works. The audience is very much intended to be election observers during the upcoming 2024 general election, who we know are very astute and have a very strong attention to detail, and who will notice things that are different this election that had not occurred or weren't used during previous election cycles across our state. So in order to help mitigate some of their concerns, we're going to show you screenshots of the system itself. We're going to talk a little bit about the items that are going to be used and that are now different across the state, so that you have an awareness and can share with them about what these differences are, understanding this is part of the modernization project that we've been working on for some time. I also want to clarify two things about what this presentation is not. This is not poll worker training. I don't want you to leave here thinking that maybe this was the worst poll worker training you've ever been in. Please understand that poll worker training is and continues to be the responsibility of the county election officials. Rest assured, they have been working with their long-term poll workers and other members of their staff, conducting train-the-trainer poll worker training in preparation for the upcoming general election. When individuals go through poll worker training, it will be much more in detail. It will provide far more context and explanations to prepare those individuals for their key role in supporting our election during this upcoming general election. Additionally, this is not a victory lap. I don't want you to get to the end of this presentation and think, okay, I guess that's it. Project's over. They're going to high five everyone, and then that's going to call it a day. There's still work to be done. This has been a long and very important project that we've been working on. But the reality is that there are subsequent phases that need to be done. There are additional modules that you will hear about later on that need to be added. There are things that we identified that are enhancements that we will need to do to increase the efficiency of the systems that we discussed today. So those projects, those other elements to this overall project will continue into the next calendar year as well into 25, leading up to and preparing for the 2026 election cycle. So what you see today, again, there will be some changes, and I'll call out specifically what some of those are. Okay, slide, please. Okay, so to start with the history of this project, right, it goes all the way back to 2002 and the passage of the Help America Vote Act. That federal act requires the adoption of a computerized standard statewide voter registration list across the entire country. Right, Nevada responded to that and developed a system that we'll talk a little bit about here briefly. That system that was in place following the passage of that act continued until the passage of Assembly Bill 422 in 2021. That bill that was passed directed that the Secretary establish and maintain a top-down database that collects and stores information relating to voter pre-registration and registration. All right, well, and we'll talk a little bit about that more later, but more specifically, that bill directed this transition, which is considered the project, the VREMS project, Voter Registration and Election Management Solution. The VREMS solution ultimately came down to a product created by a company called KnowInk, a series of products that you'll hear us talk about today. Those are Total Vote, those are the poll pads, and ePulse. And we'll go into some details and show you screenshots about the capabilities that these systems provide. Slide, please. So first of all, what's a top-down and bottom-up? I use those words and we haven't defined them yet. So currently, and really, I guess, leading up to most recently in the passage of the bill, Nevada was a bottom-up state. On the left, you can see that depiction. What that meant is each of our 17 county election officials kept and maintained their own county-specific voter registration list. These counties, each of them had different vendors in some cases, different processes, different definitions that were used. And then on a daily basis, those county lists were sent to the Secretary of State to create that mandatory, under the Help America Vote Act, statewide voter registration list. That was a bottom-up system provided from the counties to the state, updated once a day through that nightly file process that's depicted on the left side of the slide. What are we transitioning to? We're transitioning to a top-down approach. This top-down system is a centralized database that each of the county election officials continues to maintain their county-specific database of voters, but now it's a single centralized system. And we'll speak to some of the pros and cons to that here in a minute. Slide, please. So benefits. Okay, so first and foremost, right, there's a number of efficiencies that are gained across everything from reporting time, validation. There's additional efficiencies where information will be maintained across the counties. Previously, again, because the independent nature of the county databases, if a voter voted for 20 years in one county and then moved to an adjacent county, even a few miles away, they were essentially starting a brand new voter registration. So all of the records that were on file in that previous county, all of their examples of their signatures and other information, their vote history, was kept and then ultimately canceled in that previous county, and the new county started fresh. That led to, as you can imagine, especially with the transition of Nevada to a vote-by-mail state, there were some security elements where examples of signatures that we could have used for years and years back did not transfer over to the new county. Going into this new top-down system, all of that information will be carrying over with those voters, the history, the information that will help add and greatly enhance not only security, but transparency across the process, from voter registration through the conduct of an election. Slide, please. And it will, in fact, impact everybody across the state. It's going to benefit in the long term voters. It will benefit election officials, and those really are the folks first impacted by this. And it will certainly impact and increase transparency with data, again, modeling and a number of other benefits to really expose, again, the nature of how elections are conducted in Nevada. That will enable us to increase perhaps polling locations where we hadn't realized that maybe we needed them. It will help paint a clearer picture of how the electorate chooses to vote and where, so that we can meet voters where they're at to ensure that every voter is able to have their vote cast appropriately and securely. I do want to stress, though, one second, that the county election officials do retain statutory responsibility for those voter rolls. That is a question that comes up. And there are a few kind of frequently asked questions that were sent to the office that we will address throughout this presentation, and then some more at the end. This does not change county election officials' statutory responsibilities to maintain those rolls. That's a question that comes up repeatedly. It does, though, change some of the role of the Secretary of State's office. Because it's now a centralized system, the state is going to be able to take, in a way that hasn't occurred before, a lead in security standards and practices. We have already begun working with state and federal partners to increase the cybersecurity far beyond just the baseline of state standards. That's going to continue. Training and training materials. Previously, when you had a number of different systems that were in use in different counties, if an individual wanted to work in a county election office in one county and then move to the next, oftentimes it would be a drastically different system and process. Same for poll workers. It would be very different in one county to the next. Now going forward, the Secretary will be able to provide standardized information and materials to support that training, while allowing the counties to still continue, of course, to address and modify those to meet county-specific requirements. So there's a lot of efficiencies that will continue to be gained. Slide, please. So a little background also. One of the questions we get is Nevada the first state to do this? Are you the only ones? No, in fact. You can see here on the map, and this comes right from the Elections Assistance Commission, that Nevada was one of the last handful of bottom-up states. So this transition, again, is also a best practice in use currently across the country. Slide, please. So timeline. Apologize for a little bit of an eye chart, but it's important here that I touch on a couple different things. First and foremost, we have been hard at work. I think is the big takeaway. While you have been going about your day, state, county, and local election officials, the project team, state and federal partners have been working on this project to make sure that it meets the standards of the Nevada revised statutes and regulations, that it meets cybersecurity requirements, and that it be implemented in accordance with the project timelines. You can see that there are a number of releases, right? That each release is an opportunity for testing to ensure that the process and the systems were used and worked properly leading up to the general election. You can see how there's on the timeline there, the presidential preference primary as well as the primary election. You can imagine how the focus on the project had to narrow during those elections to ensure that the county and state election officials were able to administer those elections properly and securely before increasing between leading up to the general election, part of the reason why it started as far back as it did. I will also stress that there were multiple mock elections that were conducted during this timeline as well. 3 of them, in fact, with the 4th one coming up soon. We get a question, well, what is a mock election and why do you do them? A mock election is essentially a test drive of the system. You have to realize that this project, this transition to total vote from legacy systems, it's not like updating your iPhone or maybe putting a new version of Windows on your computer at home, where it's kind of a cookie cutter model where it's going to work and you have to kind of just adjust to the fact that maybe the icons look different or maybe something functions a little bit differently. Every state, of course, has unique election laws. And it's important that when we adopt total vote, ePulse, and the poll pads, that they adhere very strictly to Nevada revised statutes laid out in the 9 chapters of Title 24. We cannot and would not accept just a generic version. So these mock elections, again, it's kind of like a test drive before buying a new car, but not necessarily just as simple as making sure the windshield wipers work or that the turn signals function. Really, it's more like bringing a car from overseas. I've lived in Japan for a few years. The car that we had there had a steering wheel on the right side. The windshield wiper and the turn signals were actually flipped. But we couldn't physically have brought that car to the United States without some significant changes. Those sort of significant changes are what have been going on with Total Vote through these releases to ensure compliance with the state's statutes, to ensure that voters are able to vote and register the way that they're supposed to, according to our statutes and our state specifically. Each of those mock elections identified areas for improvement, and we prioritized and got to work on them. Some of those areas for improvement were identified as enhancements, things maybe we want but are not directly impactful or in violation with the law. Say, for example, if we wanted Helvetica, and actually I have an example slide that we'll show you here in a minute with an idea that we recognize something needs to be addressed, but it isn't impactful or in violation of state or federal law. Those enhancements will continue past and through the general election through 2025 as we prepare again for the 2026 election cycle. And you'll see, again, from the star marking today in phases 2 and 3, that's a small list of some of the additional enhancements and modules that we're going to be incorporating into the system for the betterment of elections administration across our state, to enable our county election officials to not only receive better training, but able to focus on the multitude of priorities and responsibilities that they have to their constituents across our great state. Slide, please. So the teams, the project team and roles. Before I talk through the team and the individuals involved, I do have to call out first and foremost that this, of course, would not have been possible without the very generous and appropriate, I think, recognition from our legislature and our governor about the importance of this project. The legislature appropriated $30 million. Again, that was in part because of the bill, and the bill had a timeline associated with it to make sure it was done properly. The governor agreed and again approved that funding. Second, Secretary Aguilar, his executive leadership and sponsorship of this program has been absolutely vital as well. A massive IT project that spans across the 17 counties of our state, plus the state, the Secretary of State's office, plus other stakeholders, the DMV, for example, and other federal and state partners, could not have been possible without Secretary Aguilar's personal involvement. There were times, even recently, where he was getting daily updates on this project. It truly was, as he had said himself, his main priority to ensure the security and transparency going into the 24 election was as high caliber as it could be, as deserved by our electorate. The project team themselves, you can see that there are 26 individuals that we've identified as contractors. Again, had a vast amount of experience from across both government and the private sector. Many of these individuals involved in this project have done very similar large projects in the private sector, and that wealth of experience truly was helpful. There you can see, again, I won't go into the specifics. We have a project management office team that really was the brain trust, the leadership of the project, making sure that we collectively were staying on track. We recognize the importance of an outreach and voter education related specifically to this project, and hired a PIO appropriately. A help desk. I talked previously about how we're transitioning from 17 counties with 17 vendors. Now with a state centralized system, there's a help desk requirement that's centralized with the state. And then you have a team that, again, supports that need. A number of technical individuals, again, with that background to make sure that the code was appropriate and that the nuance of the Nevada revised statutes is absolutely reflected in this system. Subject matter expert, we have one dedicated with over a decade of county election experience. There's an asterisk because I have an additional 3 members of my staff on the elections division here working for the Secretary of State that also have, in some cases, 15, 20 years plus of county election experience. That has been vital also in making sure that some of those initial questions and the framing of the system works without overburdening our county election officials. Who, of course, I do want to highlight the first ones in blue there at the bottom of the slide. Across our state, over 80 individuals at the county level and their IT staffs have been working on this project weekends, days, and nights to make sure that the electorate is met and supported exactly how they need it to be. Their experience, their mentorship, their ideas, again, absolutely invaluable and just truly priceless in making sure that this project was able to go the way it has. Internal to the elections division, again, there's 18 of us on the elections division staff. All of them, every one of us has been working on this project as well, because it truly is a game changer for how elections will be administered going forward. And our roles continue to change too, along with the Secretary of State's IT team. The project staff, again, this is from the vendor, Knowink. Approximately a dozen or more behind the scenes working to make sure that every element, again, as we identified, sorry, NRS 293 this says that, this needs to be adjusted, that they were also working around the clock to ensure the highest level of security and adherence to state and federal law. And then lastly, we had an independent verification and validation by a company called Gartner. That IV&V role is also, again, proved to be tremendously helpful. They're watching both us at the state as well as Knowink, the vendor that we're working with, to ensure compliance with contractual obligations on both sides, holding us accountable as well as the vendor to make sure that we're meeting our timelines and that the project was moving the direction it needed to. Slide, please. So before I turn it over to Mr. DeLucia, I do want to explain one last time about what we're going to be looking at here. These are going to be pictures, screenshots of the systems that are going to be used. We'll talk a little bit about the process flow. And again, in our mind's eye, when we were creating this, we were thinking about election observers who are going to be standing in a polling place here soon, or perhaps in the central county place, watching what's going on and trying to highlight what is different from before. I will stress also that because the system is live, some of the shots that you will see, the screenshots have been blurred out deliberately. The vast majority, though, were done in our testing environment. So while there may, I haven't checked, be a voter named Captain America, rest assured when you see that name pop up on the slide, that is part of our test environment where we created addresses, created names, specifically so that we could exercise the system without worrying about any sort of impact to or relating to actual voter data. All right, David, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, everyone. So what I'm going to do here is introduce you to the poll pad, which is used for will be used for voter check-in, and a number of scenarios that the voters may encounter when they vote in person at one of our voting centers. So here is a picture of the poll pad. It is an iPad with software that runs various business rules on top of a receipt printer. You'll be seeing this in multiple instances of this in all the voting centers across Nevada. Here is an illustration of the Nevada in-person voting process. The counties across Nevada use 2 vendors for their voting technologies, and between those 2 vendors, there are three different processes that the voter may use to cast their ballot. The main outlier here would be Carson and Lander, who instead of using a digital welcome card to encode their ballot and vote, they use a printed activation card that they then use with the ballot marking device. My first scenario is going to cover a registered Nevada voter, somebody who already exists in the registration list. So when a voter arrives at the voting center, they present themselves in front of a poll worker. They provide their information. The poll worker searches for them within the list, finds them, identifies them. The very first thing that the voter needs to do is to confirm that they understand that voting twice is a crime, right? Once that is done, they will be asked to verify their information. They will have, if there is anything, if the information is wrong, of course, to back out. But if there is anything wrong with their information, they will have the opportunity to correct it on the spot, such as a name change, a date of birth, party change, which is very common. The next item will be, they will have the opportunity, if they were sent a mail-in ballot, they will have the opportunity to either surrender it or affirm that they will destroy and not use it.
I do want to highlight too, David, if I may, the significant amount of information, right? When a voter sees, it's not just their name. Now, because it's got the date of birth, their party, and this other information, that increased level of information is going to help mitigate some of the risks that have occurred in the past. If a father and son or someone with very similar names appears in a polling place, it's no longer just, are you John Smith? But now specifically, were you born on this date? And is this your address? Just to ensure that that voter and that the poll worker identify the correct individual.
The next and very, very important step is that the poll worker will conduct a signature verification, right? So they will capture the signature and then they will compare it with the signature of the voter that the clerk has on file. If the poll worker has any doubts about the signature, they will have, if they believe it does not match, they have several steps that they can take. The first one, of course, is answer some questions covering personal data, which the voter can provide. They can provide the poll worker orally or in writing other personal data which verifies their identity. And finally, they can provide the poll worker with proof identification, right? Such as a driver's license, a military ID. Oh, did everybody hear me fine? I just had a little interruption. A driver's license, a state ID, military ID, etc., as per NRS 293277. Finally, the poll worker has a last opportunity to verify all the information, and then they will provide the voter with the ballot code needed for them to vote. This is harking back to the different systems. They may be provided with a welcome card that is encoded digitally for the Dominion systems, or an activation card, a printed activation card for the SNS systems, which they will then go and use with the ballot marking devices.
And as always, and this has not changed from before, that voter card or the document that is provided for Carson and Lander does not have any of their personal information on it. It strictly has the precinct to make sure that the machine pulls up that precinct-specific ballot for that voter.
The next scenario that I want to cover with you there is a new Nevada voter registration. Basically, a person who goes to the vote center and is not on the registration list, right? So the first thing the poll worker will do, of course, is search for the voter. And if they do not find them, they will be given the opportunity to register the voter. They will, in order to register, of course, the voter will have to provide a valid form of identification, which will be entered into the system, captured. They will need to answer 3 questions to verify their eligibility. In other words, are they a U.S. citizen? have they resided in the county for 30 days, and have they resided at that address for 10 days or more. If any of those, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mel.
Oh, no, I was going to highlight that while those, if the voter does say no to the first one, of course, they're ineligible to vote. The process stops right there. Of course, if a voter says that they have lived in the county for less than 30 days, the process stops specifically because 298, NRS 298 does allow a new resident to vote, albeit just for president and vice president of the United States in those general elections. And that must be done in the county clerk's office specifically. So again, I wanted to clarify that just so when you see this, if there were any questions, but again, these processes strictly scrutinized and made sure that they're in compliance, not just with 293, but across all 9 chapters, like I said, of Title 24.
And of course, if they've answered all 3 questions in the affirmative, they will be able to provide all the key information needed to complete their registration, first name, last name, date of birth, party, address, of course. I would like to highlight that there is in the background a database of all the addresses within the jurisdiction where they are voting. And as they are typing in their address, if the address is identified, it will auto-populate. This ensures that the precinct and the correct ballot that they are supposed to vote with are correctly identified. They will then be asked to verify that they reside at the address that is on the ID that presented, and if it is not, they will be asked to provide further proof of residency. And then they will have the opportunity to select their preferred language for sample ballots and election notices. And then they will be notified that they will be voting provisionally and provided a handout so that they are aware of any further documentation they need to provide by the Friday after the election, by 5 p.m. Friday after the election, in order for their provisional ballot to be counted. And then their registration will be added. They will have there will be another opportunity here to capture their signature and maybe compare it with any other signature that exists within this centralized database. For example, if they were a canceled voter, that record still exists. If the system matches the voter with that maybe canceled record, they will provide a signature for verification. And finally, we are back to the last step where the ballot is encoded on either that activation card or welcome card. Now, what happens if a registered Nevada voter has already voted? All right, so there are a few scenarios. But mainly, whenever a voter votes, the system automatically will update the status of that voter to vote. That will be their new status within the system. And that status will be communicated to all of the other poll pads within that vote center within seconds. That's quasi immediately. As for the rest of the jurisdiction, approximately 10 minutes, all the other poll pad systems within the jurisdiction will be updated, will have that updated status. This is the same for if a voter's mail-in ballot gets processed within the total vote VREM solution, then that status will be automatically communicated back to the poll pads as well, so that the person cannot vote twice. Now, if their status is voted and they do attempt to vote, it basically will prevent them. There are other cases when, for example, challenged, they will be asked to confirm that they are indeed the voter in question, and then they will be prevented from voting.
I do want to stress, simply because David highlighted on the previous slide, that transmission of information, right, from the poll pad system up to, really around the rest of that jurisdiction. That sounds like internet connectivity. Yes, that is correct. Again, as always, Nevada's voting machines, the machine you stand in front of that you put the card into with your precinct, those machines are air gapped. There is no internet connectivity from the Dominion or ES&S systems, period. Even to the poll pad. Again, that's why we have the purpose of the card to identify the precinct-specific ballot on the machines. The check-in kiosks, these poll pads that you're seeing in the screen that David's demonstrating, they do have that connectivity specifically to ensure the security of the system and the process so that nobody can vote by mail and then try to rush in and vote in person. Only the first vote gets counted. That second one becomes Exhibit 1 in a criminal investigation. And that security is equally important to us as it is to you. And that's why poll pads do have connectivity. And when people go to the polls, they will see that there's county Wi-Fi, library Wi-Fi, those sorts of systems to help facilitate this level of security.
Thank you, Mark. So yes, so and again, so in certain cases, they will be asked to verify that they are the voter in person before they are prevented from voting. Now, all this system that we just discussed, right? These are the poll pads, the individual devices that are within the vote center, but there also is a centralized management system to basically monitor all these poll pads to verify that they're all functioning in good health, and to collect all this information, the statuses, in order to update the voter records. Now, this is an example of the view that the counties will have on their screens during early voting and election day. This will be showing the turnout, how check-ins, how many check-ins are coming in, how many early voters, how many provisionals are generated, how many mail-in ballots are turned in, and the health, of course, of the poll pads themselves, so that any issue can be identified proactively and addressed immediately.
Just think about how great this system is, right? County election officials from the county seat, or depending on where they're at, that point of friction that they need to move to take care and ensure the administration of the election and that voters can vote, will have this available to them. Think of all the data, the behind the scenes opportunities for post-election analysis, identifying again, do we need more polling places, more check-in kiosks, more machines at one specific location or another? Were there lines? Can we address them in future election cycles? Or even from the start of early voting before election day? That sort of real-time adjustment is now possible in a way that simply never was before. Back to you, David, sorry.
This is another view that they will have that they will have available, basically, where they can see by polling center what the activity has been and the number of the different types of check-ins that were processed. There are a lot of different views, reports that are going to be available to the counties here going forward, where they will be able to drill in and identify any issues, any follow-ups that they need, or just provide information back to the state and to you.
And I'm certain at least some of them, David, saw that export to PDF and export to CSV at the top of the picture there, and maybe got a little bit hungry too. So again, everything we do when it comes to transparency is a public record. And these documents, these sorts of opportunities for data analysis will be made available to the public as well, of course. So you may have seen previously that there were statuses within the poll pad about mail ballots, right? So when they have voted by mail, their status within the poll pads will be mail ballot voted, and they will not be able to vote in person. But in the background, the mail ballot returns are going to be processed within the total vote voter registration and election management solution by the clerk staff back in the office, right? As mail ballots are returned, they will be processed within this system. One real fast comment, David, if you don't mind going to the previous slide. Right ahead. This is an unfortunately perfect example of that enhancement. That is an amazing picture, not of Nevada. We want a picture of Nevada on our system. It's going to be on there. Is that a violation of statute? I feel like maybe it should have been, but it's not yet, right? So we're going to work with Knowink, of course. That's a post-election type activity to make sure that this system has a picture of our state on simply the starting splash screen. Thank you.
Absolutely. And also just a quick illustration, also you say the standard login username and password. All our accounts require multi-factor authentication for extreme security. And again, so the clerk staff will be processing these mail ballot returns within this application in a specific section named ballot return. And they will they will manually return the ballots or upload files that are generated from the mail ballot sorters. And then they will process them so that the updated status goes into their record and, of course, gets transmitted back to the poll pads. Each of the ballots or group of ballots that get processed are then grouped into batches for further processing, where the staff will be able to verify the signatures, compare the signatures, just like with the poll pads. The signature on file and the signature provided will be compared. This is something that can be done either one by one, or since these are batches, they can be done in groups. But there will indeed be verified, and any mismatches will be identified for so that the county can cure the ballot and verify, further verification of the voter's identity before it is counted. Back to you, Mark.
Perfect. Thank you. So we've received, again, as I mentioned, a number of questions over the last few weeks leading up to the go live process. And I think these are worthy of addressing up front. And I think the following slide actually has a point of contact email that if I don't answer your question here, certainly encourage you to reach out to. Maybe one more after that. So first and foremost, the questions. Does VREMS alter or change the election observers' roles or responsibilities? Definitely a question we get a lot. And the answer is simply no. The bill, Assembly Bill 422 from 2021, does not alter or change responsibilities of the requirements of the observer, does not change their rights. In fact, again, from the top down, from the secretary to every single county election official, we understand the importance of transparency, and we encourage observers. In fact, the more people understand how the system works, we're certain that they will be more confident in how the process works, so that they are confident their vote counts. Next one. Why is the state implementing a new system right before a general election? So the short answer is because we're required to. Assembly Bill 422 requires the system to be in place prior to the 2024 general election. This is something that the legislature and the governor's office understood the importance of, and part of the reason why they funded the project at a level that would facilitate that implementation prior to the 24 general. It also boils down to security and transparency. The implementation prior to the general is not only, of course, required by law, but is crucial to increasing voter confidence and keeping the election secure. How does VREMS simplify the system for Nevada? So now that the system is live, again, it's a centralized statewide database, and all counties are on the same system, as I mentioned, right? We talked about training being standardized. We talked about the opportunity now for counties to reach out and talk with each other about best practices and procedures that could ultimately be codified at the state level for the betterment of not only this election cycle, but future election cycles going forward. And then the last question, does VREMS impact the timeliness of results or any tabulation procedures? The simple answer is no. Tabulation is a separate, decentralized process from voter registration. County election officials, again, have different tools and methods to conduct that tabulation based on the systems that they use. But they are two separate systems for a reason, right? And that is a system that is separate for additional safeguarding purposes and security as well. If you do have any other additional questions, though, beyond this, again, highly encourage you to reach out to Mr. Gibson. His email is there. If he does not get at least a dozen or two emails in the next 48 hours, I'll be sorely disappointed because I suspect many of you have further questions or would like to see more information about certain elements. We also, Mr. Gibson is going to put out some information, not only this slide deck, but also some one-pagers describing everything from the system overall and some others. And if you have other follow-up questions, certainly encourage you to reach out and follow up there as well. Slide, please. And ultimately, is that the last slide, David? I think it might be, actually.
Previous slide, summary.
Oh, there we go. Right. Of course. Thank you. So again, that's really what we wanted to cover today. Again, this is a huge step forward for elections administration across the state. It's going to benefit tremendously the voters, the press, the public, transparency and security. And it's something that we've been working incredibly hard on behind the scenes to ensure, again, the security of the process so that every eligible Nevadan voter that votes can be confident in the security of their ballot and safely comfortable knowing that their ballot will be counted as cast this coming general election. Otherwise, I appreciate your time. And again, maybe we could leave it up with the point of contact information just so they can get Mark's email one last time. But otherwise, appreciate your time and attention today and look forward to answering your questions as we move forward. Thank you so much.